Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now, Mr. Singh mentioned democracy. He said that in the pursuit of democracy, he will lift the whip. If he now says that's not so, then he can state that for the record. He said, we are more democratic, we lift the whip, and I just wanted to point out, let us just be accurate. People can speak their minds even with the whip imposed. And when Mr. Singh says the whip will not be imposed on his MPs, he is referring to voting positions. He is referring to a party position that when he came into chambers here yesterday, the party did not have a position. That is what we are talking about. And his MP spoke on both sides. Party did not have a position. It's not a question of totaling up the numbers at the end of the day. It's a question of coming up front and saying, this is our position as a party, even though individuals have their different views and they will speak about them. That is the point I was addressing. Now, when will a whip be lifted and when will a whip not be lifted? I made it clear in this case, why is the whip being imposed? It is because it is a policy question with serious consequences for Singaporeans. If we do not repeal Section 377A, then we are saying we will not do what we have to do, and we will pass on the buck to the courts. That's an abdication of responsibility as parliamentarians. In such a situation, lifting the whip is not acceptable for the PAP because societal interests are at stake. But where it's purely matters of conscience, and you don't quite see such a significant issue for society as a whole, where the very institution of marriage and all your housing policies and your education policies and your rules on the structure and basic content of society can change overnight, and where societies get rent asunder by cultural wars. Those are the risks we are talking about. And do we duck and say, well, you know, we don't have a position? So you're leaving it to the courts. Abortion is quite different in that it was a matter of individual conscience, at least at that point in time. I think today the issue is well settled, in Singapore at least, unlike in some other countries. But at that time, it was a matter that raised very serious personal concerns. I mean, people would know the arguments in Ireland much more recently. So I wasn't in the House at that point in time, and I don't think we should draw conclusions from the fact that one or another member was present or was not present. But I would be careful if I were Mr. Singh to bring Mr. Lee Kuan Yew into this and suggest that he somehow acted dishonourably. Now, if Mr. Singh can remind me on your second question.
It was about the LGBTQ question vis-a-vis whether they would, the PAP's position as to whether the LGBTQ community would not be victim of some personal attacks.
I think Mr. Singh mentioned pedophilia. Again, I don't recall the facts, so I can only answer in hypotheticals. I think if a pedophile was standing for elections, I'm surprised Mr. Singh would advocate that cause. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Pritam Singh.
Mr. Speaker, let me take up the last point. Before that, sorry, the point of abdication and suggesting that I'm saying Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was dishonourable. I never used those words. I think I made the point in the context of the question that I put to Minister. On the issue of pedophilia, let me share the specific statement that the PAP made, which led me to make that point. This was the statement that was released by the PAP. What is his agenda? A video has been posted on the internet showing Vincent Wijeysingha participating at a forum which discussed the promotion of the gay cause in Singapore. I don't think there's a problem with that statement. And thereafter it says, the discussion at the forum also touched on sex with boys and whether the age of consent for boys should be 14 years of age. The innuendo, I think, is clear. In the video, Mr. Wijeysingha was introduced as being from the SDP. In addition to other comments, Wijeysingha stated, I think the gay community has to rally ourselves. Perhaps one outcome of today's forum would be, for those of us who are interested, to come together to further consider how we can address the 377 issue, as well as further rights issues in relation to gays and lesbians. Now, I don't have any issue with the PAP coming up and saying, look, what is the political agenda of a candidate? But what is the relevance of that point on sex with boys? If not to cast aspersions on the candidate himself and to suggest that, did he make that point? Was this a forum where this was the only issue that was discussed? So that was intentionally included. That's my view of the statement.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I hope we don't have to go into an extended discussion on this. Mr. Singh started out the second question by saying that pedophilia was talked about. Now, let me make it clear to him. If there is a candidate who is standing for elections, whether for the PAP, and I hope the PAP will never field such a candidate, or for the Workers' Party or SDP, and if there is a suggestion of pedophilia, I will certainly speak about it. And I'm sure all right-thinking Singaporeans will speak about it and will say it is not acceptable. So I don't quite know the precise context, but as I said in my speech, sexual offenses against minors continue to remain serious offenses, and we take a very serious view. And I hope Mr. Singh is not suggesting that pedophiles stand for elections and we do not need to talk about it. As to whether there are broader innuendos, I think let's get to the point, Mr. Singh. As the Workers' Party trooped into Parliament yesterday, there was one point, and that point is Mr. Singh, sir, as leader of the opposition, was not prepared for his party to take a position. That is what we are talking about, not about an election held in 2011. We are talking about 2022. What is our position on 377A, and whether we come here prepared to take a position or we are abdicating. I think I've made my points. We leave it to Singaporeans to judge.
Mr. Singh.
Likewise, Mr. Speaker, I think I've made my point with regard to what Minister has said, but the issue wasn't about pedophilia, and I agree with him. I don't think anybody in Singapore would be thrilled to have a pedophilia as a person who is a pedophiliac standing for elections. But the question I asked was, what is the PAP's position with regard to LGBTQ plus candidates standing in general elections? I don't think a question has been answered.
It appears to me that, as usual, Mr. Singh wants to move the goalposts and start an entirely new debate about who can and who will stand for elections. I'm not the Prime Minister or the Secretary General of the party, but my personal view is that anyone who is not a criminal and who is of good character and of sound mind and who can work for the residents ought to be able to stand for elections. In all of this, in a democracy, it also depends on how people are perceived and accepted in society. All of these are relevant considerations. One has got to look at individual candidates. But Mr. Singh started out by talking about pedophilia. I'm sure the records Hansard will show that. And that is why I answered, because I was shocked that he would even ask that question. Thank you.
Mr. Singh.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the record will show what the context was with regard to that point on pedophilia. But I accept Mr. Minister's reply to my second question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other questions, clarifications? He says